Good morning or good afternoon. Welcome back to Chapel Sunday School, Lexington Baptist. This is chapter 17, 18, and 19 in the book of Leviticus. Let me ask you this. Do you remember what a chiasm is? We talked about it some time ago, but it's a literary device where words or phrases follow a pattern of repetition forward and then backward, such as when the going gets tough, the tough get going. So it goes forward and then it goes backwards. It's a very simple chiasm. But chiasms can get much more complicated, basically following a pattern of it's like A1, B1, C1, and then there's a focal point we'll call X. And then it backs up C2, B2, A2, where the A's and the B's and the C's all are similar. Uh, and you'll see how this works in this fashion. I've made a chiasm. I just made up a little story, and it's in a chiastic structure. John loves Mary very much, but Mary knows that John is not a believer. Mary began witnessing to John, telling him about Yahusha, Jesus. After much prayer for John, he became a believer. John then began witnessing to his friends about Yahusha, Jesus. John now has that blessed assurance that he is saved. Now John and Mary both love the Lord and are engaged. Well, that's a good little story, but it happens to be written in a chiastic form. You see, John loves Mary very much at the end. Now John and Mary both love the Lord and are engaged. So it's a connection. The second part, Mary knows that John is not a believer. Down at the next to the last, John is now a believer and he has blessed assurance that he's saved. Part C, Mary began witnessing to John, telling him about Yahusha. And here's the correlating part that says John then began witnessing to his friends. And then there in the dead center, the kind of the climactic point of the paragraph, after much prayer for John, he became a believer. So that's a chiasm. Here is one. They're all found throughout the Bible, the Old Testament in particular. I'm not sure of any that are really in the New Testament, in the letters and the Gospel. But a chiasm is found in Joel 3:17 to 21. And it's seven parts. It's diagrammed in that same way. That's why I chose this one, A, B, C, X, and CBA. And here's verses 17 to 21 exactly as they are read in the Bible. I just laid them out here so you can see the chiastic structure going on here. Then you will know that I, the Lord your God, dwell in Zion, my holy hill. Well, the last of it says the Lord dwells in Zion, so there's connection. The next phrase, Jerusalem will be holy. That correlates with the next to the last verse. It says, Judah will be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem through all generations shall leave their whatever, something, avenger. No, I will not. So there's a connection there with the status of Jerusalem. Then the next phrase, never again will foreigners invade her. Well, this speaks about what happened to them. Egypt will be desolate, Edom a desert waste, because of violence done to the people of Judah. And then in the middle is this nice descriptive phrase about Jerusalem. In that days, the mountains will drip new wine, the hills will flow with milk, all the rivers, ravines of Judah will run with water, a fountain will flow out of the Lord's house, that's the temple, and will water the valley of acacias. So that is a chiastic structure. Why am I telling you all this? It's because the whole book of Leviticus is in a chiasm. Now, we're more than halfway through the book, but I just recently saw this or saw it again, and I wanted to remind you of what this is saying in, about the book being in a chiasm. You can see here that chapters 1 through 7, where Israel draws near to God by their offerings and sacrifices. Remember, the word korban is the Hebrew word for sacrifice, and it means to draw near. So Israel draws near to God in all the descriptions of the offerings and sacrifices. But at the end of this book, it talks more about how Israel is to live with their God and dealing with punishments and vows. The second section, chapters 8, 9, 10, where the priesthood is established. There's Aaron, the high priest, his four sons, and how they're anointed and set aside and established to lead worship. Well, look at next to the last chapters here. It's how the priests are to conduct their service, the worship of God, and how the priests function in that capacity. Then the next section, which we dealt with the last couple Sundays, when it speaks of the health for God's people, that's when we dealt with Sara'at, which was the leprosy. And it could be in the person or on the clothing or even in the house. And so it talks about the health for God's people and what defines clean and unclean. And then last week we were at the Day of Atonement, which is a focal point, such a huge event, and it speaks to prophetically the day of a judgment day to come. And then here's where we are today, starting in chapter 17, 18, and 19, speaks about the holiness for God's people, deals with what is holy and what is common. And there's various and sundry laws that describe how the people could be made holy, i.e., set apart. That's what holy means. How the people, the children of Israel, ought to be set apart, as we are to be set apart and live holy lives. So that is why I wanted to tell you about chiasms. But it doesn't stop there. This is where we're starting the portion today. Leviticus 17, this is where we're beginning, verses 8 through 14, has a chiastic structure. And here it is. Here's verse 8 and 9. And thou shalt say to them, whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, that bring an offering, if they don't bring it to the door of the tabernacle, and if they don't do that, they shall be cut off from amongst people. They can't just make their sacrifice anywhere in the backyard or outside the camp. They make their burnt offerings at the tabernacle. And that was a law. Well, look what happens at the very end of this little passage, verse 13, 14, kind of the same verbiage. Whatsoever man there be of the children of Israel and of the strangers that sojourn among you, says the same thing up there. And it says, which hunteth and catcheth any beast or fowl that may be eaten, he shall even pour out the blood and cover it with dust. So some instructions about dealing with blood. Why is that? You shall eat the blood of no manner of flesh, for the life of the flesh is in the blood. Whosoever eateth it shall be cut off. Well, they can be cut off for disobedience to this, and they can be cut off for disobedience to this. Well, it's in the next sections. And whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel, or the strangers that sojourn among you, that eateth any manner of blood. It talks more of eating blood. I will set my face against that soul, and he'll be cut off from among his people. Well, what's on the next to the last phrase? Therefore I said unto the children of Israel, no soul of you shall eat blood, neither shall any stranger that sojourns among you eat blood. So you've got the similarity going on here. So what is in the middle of this chiasm? That's kind of gives the why. And it's right here. It's very important. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. So this is quite interesting, the chiasm here, and dealing with the importance of not eating blood, and then it gives you in the middle the why. Now I want to look a little bit further at this center point, this verse 11. This is something interesting here as well. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I've given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your souls. And who's speaking this? This is God speaking to the children of Israel. And so he says, I've given you the blood. Well, I guess he did because he made the animal that was sacrificed. But I want to look a little bit closer at this. Here this verse is in Hebrew, and it starts over here right to left. Just look at these first few words here. Ki nefesh habasar badam hu va'ani. What that is saying is there, for the life or the soul of the flesh, basar's flesh, in the blood, in blood, badam, dam is blood, in the blood. And this little phrase right here are the two words. Hu va'ani. The vav there means and. So this is where it says, actually, it can be interpreted, he and I. But see, this, like a lot of languages, they make everything masculine or feminine, and the adjective goes after, or the modifier goes after the noun. So this has been interpreted the blood, its blood, and it says, and I have given it to you upon the altar. So that word who, it can be translated he or it. So like I said, it could be the life of the flesh is in its blood, or it can be in his blood, and I've given it to you. Well, you're speaking about its blood, that goat, that bull, or it can be his blood, yes, that goat, that bull. But when you start talking about its blood or his blood, that masculine his blood, you start getting a connection to Jesus. And what's more interesting is because it says hu ve ani, it really can be translated this way. The life of the flesh is in the blood, period. There's no punctuation in Hebrew. The life of the flesh is in the blood. He and I, hu ve ani, have given it to you. He and I have given it to you. He and I, well, that goat and I have given you this blood. He's given his blood, and I created him, so he and I have given. But doesn't this connect even more to the Son of God and his blood? He, Jesus, and I, the Father, the Son, and the Father, I have given this blood to you. You've seen the Son, you've seen the Father. I just think that's quite interesting. This is one of those things that's a little gem in the Hebrew. You don't see it in English, and it reminds me of that verse. It's the glory of God to conceal a matter. It's the honor of kings to search it out. So this is something that someone has searched out and discovered, and I'm just relaying it to you. But it gives a little deeper insight. You're looking for Jesus in the Old Testament, speaking about blood sacrifice, making atonement. The Father and the Father and the Son and the Father, He and I, Jesus and the Father, have given it to you. Okay, verse 15, it goes on to say, and every soul that eateth that which died of itself, that which was torn with beasts, shall both, if he eats it, he's got to wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and he's going to be ceremonially unclean into the evening. And I didn't highlight it here, but it goes on to say that if he doesn't do that, he shall bear his iniquity. So there's a sin, a breaking of the Torah being committed if one of the children of Israel were to eat an animal that appeared to die on its own. Well, why did it die? It might have had a disease. And so this is for the health and well-being of the children of Israel. Don't eat something that died. It got sick and died, because you could get sick and die yourself. Don't eat something that was torn by another animal, because that other animal could have infected it with something and had rabies or who knows what. So a lot of these laws that we see, say, well, why are they in there? I mean, what does this apply to us? How many of us walk along in our backyard and see something dead and say, oh, I think I'll eat that? But remember where this is written, who it's written to, and the purpose for which this law is given. It's for the benefit, the blessing of the people of the covenant. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, I am Yahweh Eloheka, that is the Lord your God. Well, what is he saying there? Rather than read all that, I'm just going to tell you what it says. It says, you're not to live like the people you're leaving in Egypt, not like the people in the promised land where you're going. You are set apart. You know, this almost reminds me of another chiasm, because he's telling them, don't be like the past, the ones among you have lived in the past, nor do not live like the people where you're going, because they're all serving pagan gods. They did in Egypt. They're doing that in the promised land. And here you are, you're special, you're set apart. You're kind of like the climactic part of this chiasm going forward. And so I just think that's interesting there. But the main thing of this is this little phrase, others may, you cannot. What's special about that phrase? I remember Bill Gothard teaching this in a seminar years and years ago, and we've all been there. We said it ourselves when we were children. come home and you tell your mom and dad, well, Johnny gets to go play here. Johnny's going there. Everybody else is doing it. Why can't I? Everybody else is doing this. And I remember my mom would say, well, if everybody is jumping off the cliffs, that mean you're going to do it too? Well, Bill Gothard's mother drilled this into him, this little phrase. You're right, Bill. Others may do that. Others are doing that. Others may. Their parents may let them. Others may, but you cannot. Now, Bill might have thought that that was a punishment or unfair of his parents, just like we did as children. But no, this is a phrase that needs to be drilled into all of us because we are set apart people. And I would challenge you to remember this, but personalize it. Others may, I cannot. Others may go to a particular party where they're going to be, drinking and participating in a lot of things they shouldn't do. Others may do that. I cannot. Others may go to R-rated movies. I cannot. Others may be laughing at this dirty joke. I cannot. And so we are set apart if we're going to live holy lives. None of you shall approach to any that is near of kin to him to uncover their nakedness. I am Yahweh. Now, this is an idiom. Uncover their nakedness is an idiom, an idiomatic phrase for sexual activity. This doesn't mean you shall not sneak up behind somebody and jerk their shorts down, in public. No, this means sexual relationships. All of this, and I'm not going to read to you, talks about the nakedness of your father, the nakedness of your son's daughter, all that. It means no incestuous relationships with immediate family or in-laws or grandkids or aunts or uncles. And matter of fact, it goes on the next verse. What this is saying, it's a prohibition against any kind of sexual activity outside the bounds of marriage. So these are the laws that are in here of how we are to be set apart and live holy lives unto God. He goes on, moreover, thou shalt not lie carnally with thy neighbor's wife to defile thyself with her. That's another idiomatic phrase, you might say, lie carnally. That means have sex with thy neighbors. Well, what is this? This is adultery. You see sprinkled throughout this teaching and in this book of Leviticus, you see the 10 commandments. They were given in Exodus, but they're reiterated all through the law over and over again. This next one, thou shalt not let any of thy seed pass through the fire to Molech, neither shalt thou profane the name of thy God. I am the Lord. Well, what does this talk about? Who's Molech? It's a false god. It's a pagan god. And so what is this speaking about? You shall not commit adultery. And this passing through the fire to Molech, this is more than just worshiping an idol. Molech was made out of bronze, most likely. It was a statue. It kind of had a head of a cow, had arms stretched out with hands, and they would heat this up with fire, and they would place infants and babies in the hands of the god Molech as a human sacrifice. The pagans would do this. It was as before we think of how barbaric and what do we do? We have a little more clinical way of doing it with abortion, but sucking the baby out of the mother's womb is no less heinous. But this passing through the fire, um, that might be, say, a family in a pagan culture. They had 8 or 9 kids. They can't afford to have another one, just like a lot of people do for abortion today, convenience. They say, well, our crops weren't good last year. Let's make this child a sacrifice. It breaks our heart, but we're going to make a sacrifice of this child to Molech, and maybe our crops will be better because this is life and death. We've got to have food. And that's the way the process went. Um, this is what God has said the children of Israel to have nothing to do with that. What about thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind? It is abomination. What in the world is that? That's homosexuality or sodomy. You might see it spelled out a little more clearly in the New Testament, even, but here it is in the Old Testament. So we know that this is a sin, and we can't condone this amongst us. And this is why we've got a problem in America, and look what it's done. Even in how churches have backed off of this and say, well, no, love is love, and it's okay to lie with a man as with a woman. It's not an abomination. Church people are saying that they're ordaining deacons and pastors who are homosexual. This is why the Methodist Church had 36,000 churches leave the Methodist Church for that was one of the reasons, but they were having women pastors, just just deviating away from what would be considered biblical in this fashion in regards to homosexuality. What about this? Neither shall thou lie with any beast to defile thyself therewith. Well, most of us would say, well, neither shall any woman stand before a beast to lie down thereto. It is confusion. Well, that's putting it mildly. That's a nice way of saying it. It's an abomination. It's confusion. That is bestiality. I remember when I was little, even a teenager, first time I found out the Bible had a prohibition against bestiality. I'm like, really? Is that in the Bible? Nobody does that. Who in the world would do that? My goodness, it's something that the realms of darkness do this, um, and that's enough said about that. But so you see, so many commands that are here that are meant to teach us how to live righteously in an unrighteous world. Defile not yourselves in any of these things, for in all these things nations were defiled, and I cast out before you, and the land is defiled. Keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations. You shall therefore, obey this. Why? So that the land will not spew you out when you defile it. And of course, when you speak of a land, you're including the people there. If there's an uninhabited land, there's nobody there to defile it. And so it's not talking about just ecological pollution. It's the sin is what defiles the land. Spilling of innocent blood defiles the land. We become a defiled people. Now, how might the land spew us out? Well, read Revelations. It's judgment. The judgment's coming, and we see even today. Every time there's an earthquake or a flood or dry, I don't know that I'm going to jump to the conclusion that is the land trying to spew the people out. But neither can I say that these are not judgments that the Father has done and will do and will culminate in the end of time in bringing judgment upon a land that has been defiled, a nation has been defiled. We can easily see how it's like God takes away his hand of protection and let nature do what it would do without his protection of sending earthquake, flood, drought, and disease. There, but by the grace of God go we. For whosoever shall commit any of these abominations, even the souls that commit them shall be cut off. There's that phrase again, cut off from their people. Therefore shall ye keep mine ordinance, that ye commit not any one of these abominable customs that were committed before you. See, they did this in Egypt, these very things that we've just read, and that they defile not yourselves therein. He's warning them, you may find people in the promised land that are doing this. You're going to drive them out. You're not going to participate with that. And that's what they did in Egypt. You're leaving all that. You're going to be my people, holy, living righteously. You're going to be Kadoshim, which means holy people. The word Kadosh means holy. You remember that, Kadosh. And Yahweh spoke unto Moses, saying, speak unto all the congregation of the children of Israel, and say to them, ye shall be Kadosh. Ye shall be holy, set apart. For I, Yahweh Eloheka, the Lord your God, I am holy. You shall fear every man his mother. Well, don't just be scared of your mom. It means show great respect, revere, reverence. Every man, honor thy father and thy mother. See, there's one of the 10 commandments there. And keep my Sabbaths. Oh, what do you know? There it is. There's the 4th commandment. They keep showing up. Turn ye not unto idols. There it is again. That's one of the first commandments. Nor make yourself molten gods, idolatry. And if you offer sacrifice a peace offering, these were offerings that were intended to be eaten. It's like a barbecue. But he says it's to be eaten on the same day that you offer it. Why would he make a law out of that? Because he says if it be eaten at all on the third day, it's an abominable. It's abominable. Now he says eat it on the first day. There's nothing here said about the second day, but definitely don't eat it on the third day. Why is that? They didn't know about germs and parasites and things could, we don't grill hamburgers and let them sit there 3 days and think we're going to go outside and eat them. They spoil very quickly and get infested with germs. And this is just what the Father is putting in the law to protect his people. And when you reap the harvest of your land, don't wholly reap the corners of the fields. That was a law, a commandment. Why? Because it's looking out for the poor and the stranger. If it had not been for this law, I don't think we would have heard of Ruth and Naomi, because that's how they were surviving. Naomi was going out and gathering in the field of Boaz gleanings that were left and eating from the corners, gathering from the corners of the field. That was kind of like a law for poor people. And it's a good law. You shall not steal. There's another commandment. Nor deal falsely, neither lie. That's not bear false witness. What about this? Don't swear by my name falsely. Um, we're not going to get into it where the Pharisees were asking Jesus about this, and he said, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no." And it's been a misinterpretation that Jesus commanded, "Do not swear at all." He didn't say that. His commandment was, "Do not swear falsely in your oaths. Let your yes be yes and your no be no." But this is what this is saying. Don't swear by my name falsely. That's like taking the name of the Lord, our God, in vain. And don't defraud your neighbor. What is that? That's leading someone on to promising them, like giving them, I'll pay you X amount, and then the next day you give them less. Having defrauded them, led them to believe you were going to fulfill your commitment, and then you didn't. That's robbing him. And so we're not to do that. Do not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind. The Father has a heart for the orphan, the widow, the handicapped, the invalid, the children, the weak. He loves those and he will look out for those. And he put a definite law here to not, because you imagine in this culture, their cultures like this. If someone was born deaf or blind, they would easily come up with a reason to say, "Oh, well, this is demonic," or the parents sinned that caused this child to be born blind. And God says, "No, don't curse the deaf. Don't put a stumbling block before the blind. You shall do no unrighteousness in judgment." Well, this is, boy, don't we want this? Righteousness shalt thou judge thy neighbor. You've heard it said, the American way, truth, justice, and the American way. Wasn't that Superman? Our ethics were based on Judeo-Christian ethics, and righteousness and justice and truth should be very much a part of our judicial system. But look at what America's become. There is so much injustice and inequality. Biden Hunter is not going to go to jail because he's privileged and he's not going to be treated righteously and in fairness. There's case after case of that. We've gone astray as a nation. Do not spread slanderous gossip among your people. Well, amen to that. That would be a good law to follow. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Didn't Jesus quote this? The greatest commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind. And the second is like unto it, love your neighbor as yourself. This little passage says it's something interesting. It says, do not mate different kinds of animals. Don't plant your field with two kinds of seed. Do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material. What is this all about? If you will read this, not in the micro, but in the macro, kind of look back at what is he saying here. God doesn't like mixture of holy and profane. And Look at the mixing of different kinds of animals. The furthest extent of that is all the genetic manipulation and development and cloning that's been going on. Um, this is displeasing to God. We're playing God. Don't plant your field with two kinds of seed. There needs to be a purity in what God provided for us. And it even goes to the clothing to don't mix fibers. Now, there's some scientific reason to go along with this. There's some accounts I've read about, your electromagnetic field around you can be short circuited by mixing different fibers of polyester and cotton mixtures. It gets complicated. Some people have done some real research on this, but I think the admonition there to keep a purity in your clothing, but not also in just your clothing, your field, and your animals, but it gets further into more what just our appearance. Now he inserts in here, whosoever lieth carnally, there it again, with a woman, she shall be scourged. Well, that's not a really good translation in Hebrew. The Hebrew says, there shall be a scourging, which means both of them, for both were guilty. Because you look at this and say, whoever lies carnally with a woman. Well, you're assuming that's a man lying, having sex with a woman, not his wife, a bondmaid, betrothed to her husband and not all redeemed. That it's a man lying with a woman and says she shall be scourged. Well, the Hebrew says there shall be a scourging. And this is what we just read about homosexuality. This could even refer to if a woman is lying carnally with a woman, there will be a scourging, both of them. And it says they shall be put to death. And he shall bring his trespass offering unto Yahweh to the door of the tabernacle, and the priest shall make an atonement. This foreshadows what Yahusha, our high priest, did for us. And the sin which he doth shall be forgiven him. All this is foreshadowing the cross, the high priest coming, making a blood sacrifice and atonement, and sin being forgiven. And when ye shall come into the land, and shall have planted all manner of trees for food. This is interesting. They said, then shall you shall count the fruit thereof as what? Uncircumcised? What in the world is that talking about? Wesley's notes um, give an interpretation of this. That is, uncircumcised meaning unclean, not to be eaten. Um, the Gentiles, the pagans, were the uncircumcised. They were unclean, and there was actually an agricultural benefit here. The tree grew better and faster. Um, and being early stripped of those fruits would have drawn away much more of the strength from the tree. So, that's a good rule for agriculture. But he put that in there in the Word of God. Instruction in the 4th year, the fruit therefore should be holy to praise Yahweh withal. In the 5th year, you shall eat the fruit thereof, that it may yield unto you the increase thereof. So if there's patience in agriculture, not eating of the first season of the fruit, it will really be better for the plant, and you will be being obedient to the Torah. You shall not eat anything with the blood. We've established that. Then it says this other part here, neither shall ye use enchantment nor observe time. Seem like two different things in the same sentence. But what is this? The Hebrew word here is nachash, which means to practice divination by observing signs, like astrology, enchantment, observing times, checking your horoscope, going to Sister Louise, who has a crystal ball, um, observing the times and telling fortunes. No, we're not to do that. You shall not round the corners of your heads, neither shall you mar the corners of your beard. You see, this Hasidic Jew, this was keeping strict obedience to this law and not cutting any of the hair on their temples. Wesley's notes about the hair on your temples. This the Gentiles did, either for the worship of their idols. For this reason of this prohibition is the reason for this prohibition is because God would not have his people agree with the idolaters, neither in their idolatries, nor in their excessive sorrowing, nor so much as the appearance of it. So, the practice of shaving your head or your hair um, in the way the pagans would do is a normal practice. The children of Israel were just set apart. You see, this is something that's out of our cultural understanding. Now, I can't fault if this man wants to let the hair on his temples grow because he wants to obey very strictly this command. There's nothing wrong with him doing this. Um, but I'm not going to go teach people that they need to do this because my understanding is that this is not something that would make sense today as far as differentiating us from pagans who shave their temples. But, if you do look like this, it does identify you as different. Most people in the world would recognize this as a Jewish person. What is it that identifies Christians? I guess, wearing a cross. You can't necessarily say that. Madonna wore a cross. So, how do we, I think we dress modestly. Um, you know, we, um, we try like this says, you should not make any cuttings in your flesh for the dead, nor print any marks upon you. Well, no, here's a little tattoo on a heel. And this actually says the word faith and it has the shape of a cross. Now, there are plenty of people and Christians that may have a tattoo like this. Personally, I don't have an issue that this is something that would identify you as being pagan, to have this on your ankle, where it's most of the time covered up anyway. But, you look at these guys and, this gives the appearance of ungodliness, of worldliness. But that doesn't mean that these guys are in this picture are totally lost, going to hell. For all I know, they're hugging each other because they just got saved 2 hours before they took this picture. So you always can't judge the book by its cover, certainly. But there's got to be an awful lot of tattoo regret on people that get such things as they get older, particularly people who put this type of thing on their face. If they ever do come into a relationship with the Father and would realize there was just a ton of regret for having done what they did, it could be a very painful process to try to undo what they did here. Do not prostitute your daughter, lest the land become full of wickedness. Well, you and I would say, well, don't worry, I wouldn't dare do that to my daughter. But this goes on. There are women that sell their children. I heard testimony last week. Women that selling their kids to men for sex because they needed the money and it was survival. But this is a commandment. This brings wickedness. This wages of sin is more sin. The children of Israel certainly weren't to be doing this. Well, look at that. There it is again. You shall keep my Sabbaths. Regard not them that have familiar spirits. What is this? Familiar? Oh, you look familiar. What is this? A familiar spirit? That has a definition. Neither seek after wizards. Familiar spirits are spirits or demons that serve or prompt an individual. They're often associated with witchcraft and necromancy. That's communication with the dead. And they require a pact or link to a person, place, or thing. Some believe they are souls of the dead, humans who were invoked by a medium or a magician. So we're not to have anything to do with this necromancy or contacting the dead or demonic things with familiar spirits or soothsayers or crystal ball, those kind of things. You are to rise in the presence of the elderly, honored and honor the aged. I love this verse. I used this verse on a Senior Adult Appreciation Day one year, and I had everyone who did not consider themselves elderly to stand up in the presence of elderly because we had elderly in the service and recognition day, and I wanted us to honor them. And I dare say most people did not know that that was a biblical commandment, along with thou shalt not steal, kill, rob, all these things. Yeah, we accept those. We believe those. Well, why do we discard some of the laws and keep some of the laws? We remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. We rise in the presence of the elder. Honor thy father and thy mother. The stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you. This is a good command, because otherwise the Jews, they've already became kind of like a us for no more separate sect, a separate special club if you're Jewish. But God's command was that if you were an Egyptian and you left Egypt and went with these Hebrew people, you worshiped their God, you followed their Torah, you were to be treated as if you were born among them. And so this is what, Paul picked up that in Christ, there's neither Jew nor Greek, nor male nor female. This is what he's getting at, that we are to be dwelling on the unity that we have with one another. And don't be cliquish with our races. Ye shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Well, amen to that. Now, I'm going to leave you with this song that I wrote in 2005. I actually wrote this song for the prison ministry and went singing to the prisoners, because I got to thinking about them. They've all been declared guilty and stood before a judge or jury, and they were sentenced, and now they're marked. They can't hide their sin. Well, how many people are walking around that are guilty or just as guilty? Good night. There might be murderers around among us that have not been indicted, haven't been caught, and they haven't been declared guilty. But one day we all will stand before the judge, God the Father. And if he says to us, how do you plead? We there's no way we can say not guilty, Your Honor. If we were to say not guilty, Your Honor, he said, well, you're guilty now because you just lied. We're all guilty. But God will deem us innocent again if we are in Christ. We've been covered by the blood of the Lamb. The debt was paid. That is what this song is about. God will deem me innocent again. Okay, I'm going to leave you with it, and then I'll see you next week.
We came into this world so innocent. A child's heart is heaven bent, but there is no escape. We are a fallen race. There is a debt I owe for all my sin. I could never pay the price. I couldn't make a sacrifice big enough to take away my sin. But if I let the blood of Christ cover up my sacrifice, God will deem me innocent again. I cannot comprehend, I'll never understand the evil in this world. It's like a flood. Paradise was lost at such an awful cost, but Jesus paid it all with his own blood. 'Cause I could never pay the price. I couldn't make a sacrifice big enough to take away my sin. But if I let the blood Christ, cover up my sacrifice. God will deem me innocent again. He wore a crown of thorns, his flesh was ripped and torn. They laughed at him and spat upon his face. How could he take those nails? The one who never failed, the sinless Son of God hung in my place. 'Cause I could never pay